Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime Entertainment. We have here a very special guest today, Jody Plauche. Now, people might know his father, Gary Plauche, and it's a very infamous case, what I might consider the world's first viral video. And we'll get Jody's take on that here and kind of get this whole breakdown of the story, how it all began, and ultimately the events that transpired, which were caught on camera. And like I said, it is my opinion, the world's first viral video. Please welcome to the show, Jody Plauche. Jody, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Fantastic, man. Couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. And, first off, I want to tell you how much thankful I am for you coming on the show. I know we had reached out a while back and we were just getting started. And I never forgot this story. And I remember seeing this story, obviously, a long time ago. I remember watching it with my dad. It was on some sort of news special. And I think probably what you'll get from about any dad in America is, I don't blame him. I'd have done the same thing. I don't know if I've heard anybody that's seen or heard or known the facts of this case that said any different. Is that kind of the consensus that you've had throughout all this?
Yeah, 99.9% of the people who comment or reach out, a lot of times it's, your dad's a hero. He did what most fathers want to do, but don't do. And I mean, every now and then you'll get your person or people who are like, well, you know what? It's not right to take the law into your own hands. You can't have a vigilante society, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and you know what? My dad would agree with that. My dad would not be in favor of others taking the law into their own hands. It's just he also has a duty he felt as a father to protect his family, and that's what he felt like he was doing.
Absolutely. And for people that aren't familiar with this case, we're going to get into it kind of from the beginning. So you grew up in what, Baton Rouge, Louisiana?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay, so are you convicted as a LSU Tigers fan? Are you guilty of that?
Not at all. Wait. Since we discussed it already, not at all. Not at all.
I got double
My
fisted
uncle,
drinks there.
my uncle, who was my dad's brother, he was a cheerleader for the LSU football national champions in 1958. So
Wow.
I mean, my LSU bloods go deep.
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, a lot of history there. And there was we done a show on what's a Barry Seal. And they were saying that Barry Seal used to fly. He was they made the movie about him called American Made with Tom Cruise, where he was the drug smuggler, whatever. They said that he would fly over that stadium in Baton Rouge like so low that he would almost clip the scoreboard sometimes going over there.
I'm sure he did. If you look at my Facebook profile picture right now, that's me and Barry's son, Aaron,
Really?
on the in my profile picture. Yeah,
Wow, that's Barry Seal's son.
yeah. I'll
That's
leave it up till after this airs, so just let me know, and then I know if people want to go look at it, they can see Gary Plauche and Barry Seal's sons together.
wow. That's very interesting. Okay, cool. So growing up in Louisiana, now your dad, from what I understand, very good dad, but just like to have a drink every now and then. And from what gathered from my research, never like somebody. There's some people when they have a few drinks, you don't want to be around. My sister is like that. I don't want to be around. I don't want to be around her sober, but let alone having a few drinks. But by all accounts, your dad was just that the guy that you like to be around. You like to hang around, much like my dad. My dad, liked to have a drink or two, but he was never. It never turned to mean or violent. Is
Mm-mm.
that kind of what Gary was like?
Yeah, my dad would have a few drinks. He want to buy you another one. He wasn't
Right.
one. Now I know when he was younger, growing up in Baton Rouge, they'd go out and bar fight and stuff like that. But as an adult, once he got married, once he had kids, he quit doing that. And really, he was a salesman, so his job was to get up, go entertain clients, and part of that came with, hey, let's go have a couple beers over at the Cotton Club, and we'll have lunch and have a couple beers, and he'd leave, go back to the office. Then he'd go out to probably either our football, our sport practice, whether it was football, basketball, baseball, soccer, whatever it was. And he'd have his ice chest with him at the ball fields, and he'd be. And so, I mean, that was just kind of like the lifestyle back then.
Right. Yeah. Much
At
like, I
least,
mean, I'm from
at
the
least in
South.
Louisiana, it was.
Yeah, I'm from the South. That was kind of how my dad was. He done sheetrock work, and whenever he would get off, he would go to the local beer joint there with some of his buddies that owned it, and they would hang out. And at the time, I think the poker machines were still around, so they'd throw a few dollars in that, play some pool, and all just hanging out and having a good time. So I know I can picture. I got a mental picture real clear of how your dad was.
Daddy loves his poker machines.
Oh yeah, yeah. But mine golfed and they played poker games and all that. I learned a lot about the innards of gambling from my dad and a lot of his friends. They would have race pools and obviously everybody liked to bet a little bit on football. So that was kind of like me breaking my teeth into all of the aspects of gambling, be it poker machines or playing poker or all those kind of things. So you learn a lot growing up around that. I mean, you learn a lot at an early age, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it shapes you for later on. So you had two brothers.
I have an older brother and a younger brother, and my sister's the youngest.
Okay, so older brother, younger brother, sister's youngest. Now, the individual that we're going to kind of get into here is Jeff Doucette. That's his name, correct?
That's how he pronounced it. Yes.
Okay. So he was actually a karate instructor.
Yes, he was.
Okay, so how did this come about? Like, was doing the karate something that you guys wanted, or was that, mom or dad just kind of get you doing something active? How was that come about?
I was already in, like I said, football, basketball, baseball, soccer. So I had really no interest. So in fifth grade, when I got the flyer to take karate, that flyer didn't make it out of my room. I distinctly remember balling it up and throwing it into the garbage can. What ended up happening is my little brother, he wasn't into any sports. And so he brought the same flyer home. I think he was in second grade and he went to a different school. He went to, there was two schools in the school system. You either went to Mayfair Elementary, which was like third, fourth, and fifth, or you went to Jefferson Terrace, which was like kindergarten through second grade. And he, which was the second grade, he got his flyer and he brought the flyer home. So my mother thought, oh, you know what? Well, I'll put Mikey in it. That's my younger brother since he doesn't have any extracurricular activities. And when she went ahead and did it, she just went ahead and signed me and my older brother up as well, just so he could have his brothers there with him. So that's how we ended up taking karate. Well, the first karate instructor, his name was Rick. He showed up for the first lesson. Then when we showed up for the second lesson, he didn't show up. When we showed up for the third lesson, he didn't show up. So the organization was called Campfire. They turned our names over, like the 10 to 15 kids that were taking karate from Rick, turned our names over to Jeff Doucette. And Jeff, he actually had a karate studio, whereas Rick, we were in the playground of the elementary school. So this was kind of like an upgrade. Here this guy has mats and heavy bags and jump ropes. And so he said he would honor the 10 lessons that we had already paid for. I think it was like $35 for 10 lessons. So we'd already paid for it. So he was going to honor that. And then we could decide whether we want to continue taking karate after that. So he had a kind of small window to kind of make a good impression on the family and kind of groom the family and make it fun to where we'd want to take karate.
Right. So, I mean, did you enjoy it like at first in those first couple of lessons? I mean, did you kind of take a liking to it, or was it kind of just
No, absolutely. It was a great time. I mean, that was, if I wouldn't have liked it, I wouldn't have kept taking karate. He would never have the chance to test my boundaries and groom me and my family. But no, it was great. I mean, they had what's called a fighting team. It was like a group of like maybe 8, 9 boys that would travel around to karate tournaments. I mean, the first karate trip I didn't even go on. Me and my dad didn't go on it. We just heard from Mikey and Bubba how much fun it was, and so that was to Houston back in March of '83. And so we were like, man, the next time we wanted to go, we're like, yeah, let's go. And so I think it was in April of '83, the beginning of April of '83. Daddy went, and we went back a couple weeks later to Houston, and that's when Jeff actually started to really advance his, boundary testing with me.
so? And that's something that I want to expand on just a little bit because I've heard some prior interviews to where you say these people, these assholes, whatever label you want to put on them, when they go to test these boundaries, like you say, they do it in a way to where if you question it, they can easily play it off. Oh, I was just kidding, or oh, I was this. And it's the same way, not even just in y'all situations, but I even tell my wife, like, when guys or other men, like, depending on the conversations that they're having, I'm like, what they're doing is they can open a door and they want to see if you walk through it or if you're going to close it automatically. They want to see how it is. And if you shut it down, they can be like, oh, I was just picking. I didn't mean anything by it. Pedophiles are the same way. They do that same exact thing. They start off very, very slowly. I mean, it's a long game. And that's what I was wanting to kind of get into. So what was some of the things that he did to kind of start testing the boundaries to see how you were going to react?
All right. So the first thing, looking back. Now, this is me looking back as a
Right.
former certified sexual assault counselor and education trainer. Um, my first, I guess, instances would be whenever he would stretch us for karate. Um, he would he got it to where we were used to him reaching between our legs like by our thighs and going, "Ooh, you got to do a split. Feel how tight it is right here. Oh, you got to, you know." And he'd hold us by our hips, and he's like, "All right, a little further, just go a little further." And that was him, I think, normalizing that us, being him touching us in near our private area. The one that uh, stands out to me, like when it first registered as a kid. Now let's go back to my 10-year-old self is we were coming home from practice one day and he let me drive the car. And as I was driving the car, he put his hands in my lap and then he kind of moved them around to where if I'd have been like, what the hell are you doing, Jeff? He's like, oh, it was an accident. I'm trying to do stick shift. And he would have left me alone. But I
Mhm.
didn't say anything. And that's whenever he upped his game. And so, I mean, it was gradual. And there was one night we were going crawfishing and he got us to a hotel room. So there was like 8 of us piled in these 2 beds. And that particular night, he just rubbed on my, you know, I guess I wouldn't have been a manhood back then, but he rubbed on me all night, like he wouldn't leave me alone all night. And so I was pretending like I was sleeping. I didn't want to acknowledge that this man was doing this to me and let him know that I knew that he was doing this because I was not responding.
Right.
Well, after during the crawfish bowl, he said we got to go get some ice or something. Jody, come ride with me. So I got in the car, and as we are driving, he was like, "You don't tell your parents what I do." And I was like, "Do what?" Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was sleeping. I didn't say that, but that's just kind of like, and it was that right then. That's when I think he knew. Okay, I got him.
Yeah. Now, was this going on with any of the other kids that you knew of or found out later or
Yeah. There was another kid in the karate class who was a year older than me, who was his. I mean, he was aging out. Okay, he was starting to go through puberty. He was starting to get pubic hair, and you know, able to fire off. But so pedophiles aren't into that. They're into kids with no body hair that hasn't been through puberty that can't you know you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I got you. You can feel, I mean, you can get as detailed as you want on this show. We don't have any boundaries, we don't have any language barriers or anything like that, but whatever you're comfortable with. But yeah, I've got what you're
Oh,
saying. I'm picking up what
I'm
you're saying.
I'm very comfortable. Okay, so let me rephrase it. They don't like kids that can shoot off.
Yeah. Um and Jesus. So I guess when they get to that age too, a little bit older, if they're not maybe so much of in tune of going along with this, then they're actually, I mean, especially too taking karate, they can kind of fight back. So they probably like to keep their focus on the younger ones that's a little bit less to be resistant to it.
Well, and that's what they're attracted to. I mean, they're
Yeah.
attracted to the young kid. I mean, so that's
So
unfortunate, but it's a reality.
did you, I mean, in your mind at the time, like, obviously now this is stressed beyond measure. What to look out for, the signs. I don't really know how much it was stressed to be aware of back in those days. Like, did you have any sort of training or was there any sign of videos, in the schools at that time? I mean, I was born in 1983, so obviously by the time I got old enough to start seeing these things, there was a little bit more, nothing like it is now, but what was kind of the prep for to be on the lookout for this sort of thing?
My mother warned us that there was people out there that would take advantage of children, and there was it wasn't an after school special. It was a made for TV movie called Fallen Angel. It was about a guy taking child pornography pictures of, or having photo shoots with these young kids, and so I knew that ahead of time. So whenever Jeff started, I remember driving a car and Jeff put his hand in my lap, and me thinking, "Oh wow, these are one of those people that mommy told me about. He's one of these weirdos that do things to kids." So that was that minimal prep, that little bit of prep of me knowing that he was doing something wrong, that I wasn't to blame. I think that absolutely helped me in my development as far as like being able to get over what happened with me.
Okay, see, that's what I was wondering was, did you comprehend exactly, what was going on this time and who Jeff actually was? Because I mean, a lot of kids, I've known parents they shelter kids a lot and don't talk to them about the dangers of stuff like this, and especially it seems like unfortunately these assholes get into these types of situations where they're gonna be around a lot of kids, be it in sports or karate or whatever. And I remember when I was in elementary school there was this guy that I'd never really been a chess player, but I got to into taking chess, and there was a certain teacher that taught it. And it comes out later on that I guess some of the tournaments that these kids were going to, chess tournaments, the teacher was doing things inappropriate with the kids. Now I never went on any of the tournaments, so I never seen or doing anything like that. He never done it towards me, but it came out and it was quite public for the time, and I don't exactly know what happened with that situation. He wound up moving away, but I was in elementary school, so that was kind of my first brush of, wow, authority figures are people that do this. It's not necessarily the bad guy with the mask and that looks like a villain or something like that. It's really the one that portrays themselves as your friend.
An elementary school is like a Hooters to a pedophile.
Yeah.
It's like the average grown man. It's like Hooters to pedophiles. I mean, they're just there and they're attracted. That's why they put themselves in. That's why they are the little league coaches because they want to be around kids because they want to be able to gain that trust of that family. They want to be able to. I'll bring him home after practice. You don't worry about it. To have that alone time with children. That's why one of the lines in my book that I mention is that if somebody wants to have spend more time with your child than you do, that's a red flag. And if someone's always trying to isolate your kid, hey, I'll give them a ride. Hey, I'll bring them to practice. I've done minimal things with my nieces and nephews. I did take them to their first Saints game. I took them to a LSU basketball game, but that was a formal request from my brother. Hey, can you do me a favor? We got to go out of town. I need someone to bring him to his game. Can you do it? I never offered. Hey, I can bring him tomorrow too. I've never done that. I think I got a decent relationship with my nieces and nephews, but I don't have that real special relationship where we're hanging together all the time because I don't want to be hanging around kids.
Right. Yeah, I get that 100%. So, and he was actually friendly with your father. I think I've heard stories about how your father, felt bad for him and would, have him over for dinner and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, the reason why Jeff was kidnapped me is because he owed a friend of my dad's money that he had kind of did a bad business deal with. My dad introduced him to try to help him with this business, and Jeff ended up screwing that guy over, which again makes my dad look bad. Then to find out, for the last year he's been banging your son, that was a bit much for daddy to handle.
Yeah. So it was like, what was it, like LSU bandanas or something like that? The guy spotted Jeff like 15 grand up front. And instead of actually buying the stuff and making the, I guess the sales to get that and getting the 15 grand on the back end, he just kind of blew the first 15 and then people were looking for it.
Then he didn't have the money for the second 15, where it's because he was stupid, because it was an idea. He had it sold. He legit had an order of 15,000 bandanas. The guy wrote him a check. It's like I do speaking engagements, okay? And if my speaking fee is, let's say, 3,500, and someone wants to buy, let's say, 100 copies of my book from me at a discount at 25% off. I just did a presentation in New Orleans last week, and they sent the money up front so I could buy 125 books so that everyone at the conference could have a book in their gift bag. Well, I didn't just take the money and just go spend it and not have the money for the books. I mean,
Right.
that's what Jeff did. I mean, literally, he was paying $1 for a bandana. Don ordered 15,000 bandanas. So all Jeff had to do was take that first $15,000 check, hand it to the people at the store where he was getting the bandanas from, bring a 15,000 a box of it would have been, excuse me, it would have been a box. Bring 15,000 bandanas to Don Landers, and he's going to write you a check for $15,000 that is yours to go do whatever the hell you want with
Mm-hmm.
it. And he was just too stupid. He was just a con man first. So he was always trying to screw over people. And maybe that was a defense mechanism of being a pedophile. I don't know. But besides being a pedophile, he was a sociopath as well. He didn't give a shit about nobody.
So what kind of time frame are we looking here? Because he said that's when it kind of progressed that night. You done the crawfish thing. That's when he kind of really stepped over the line. When did it come to when like things I guess finally came to a head? When did he finally just go completely over the line?
All right, so my best recollection of being contacted by Jeff would have been like at the very end of 1982. So we probably would have sort of taken our karate lessons in the very beginning, like January of '83. So it wasn't until March of '83 that we had the crawfish boil, and it wasn't until April of '83 till he first performed oral sex on me, and it wasn't until May of '83 that he first actually had sex with me.
Okay. So when this starts to happen, like what is in your mind as far as like, obviously I'm sure you're not thinking this is normal. Do you think, you don't want to tell your dad because of in fear of what he might do? What's kind of the thought process here? Because I think this is a key thing because I've talked to people that's been, men and women that's had these issues. And the number one thing is they don't want to tell people because they're a lot of times they're afraid of what other people might do.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I tell people all the time. I knew my dad would kill him, so it was just easier for me to keep quiet, not to upset them. I knew eventually Jeff would move on to somebody else, and not that who knows what my grown-up Jody self would have done whether I would have went back and confronted him. I don't know. I never had to worry about that. So I think that by Daddy doing what he did, it kind of it erased all that doubt from me. I never had to worry about
Right. So at what point did you he actually take off, I guess, because this goes on obviously for a period of time. At what point did he know that he was going to take off?
it. Well, he probably knew a month before he left, but he was trying to con another person out of the money. So he was trying to borrow money from this person to pay this person. Then he would
Rob
have
Peter
borrowed
to
money
pay
from this
Paul.
person.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so he told me probably a month before he took me that he was trying to get this money. That if he didn't, that he was going to California and he was going to bring me with him. So he got to my house on February 19th, 1984, which ironically enough is it shares the date with the date Barry Seal was shot. Barry was shot on February 19th, I think '86 or '87, and
Wow.
so he asked my mom, "Hey June, can I borrow your car? I got to go check on some carpet." Another one of the Karate Kids' parents was building a new house, and Jeff's brother was owned a carpet business, was going to put the carpet in it. So he told my mother, "I'm going to go right over to this house and see if they put the carpet in. Come ride with me, Jody." My mother was like, "All right," and gave him the keys of the car. We got in the car and we were driving the opposite way of the house. And I was like, "Where are we going?" He said, "We're going to Mike's house." We went to his brother's Mike's house to get some clothes, sleeping bag, just stuff to go to take with us to California. And so we left Mike's house in Gonzales, Louisiana, and we headed to his mother's house in Port Arthur, Texas. All the while in my mother's car.
Wow. So she's expecting y'all to be back shortly.
Yeah, and so Jeff had his mother call my mother and say, "Oh, look, Jeff's here. Um, he's got Jody. Jody's safe. He's going to bring Jody back in the morning." So my mother held off calling the cops. And when I didn't show up Monday, her, I guess maybe Monday night, she called her friend Mike Barnett, who worked for the sheriff's department, called him. And the next day, my mother and a couple of deputies went to Port Arthur, Texas, and got there that morning. And we had left like maybe an hour earlier out of Orange, Texas, on a bus. So they just missed us.
Wow. Now, backtrack just a second. So he's got a brother. Jeff's got a brother there. Did you know the brother at all?
Yes, I knew both his brothers.
Okay. Now was the
No, he
brother
had three brothers, three brothers.
three brothers? Now were the other brothers partaking in the same sick shit as Jeff, or were they pretty straight laced?
No, no. As a matter of fact, when Jeff was flying into Baton Rouge right before Daddy shot him, they were kind of going over, okay, who are the other kids you've molested? You need to know what their parents look like. You need to be looking for them. And they asked him about who else he thought might harm him. He said, well, it depends. If my brother Sam, who was kind of an outlaw, he said, if Sam doesn't know what I've done to the kids, he might try to break me out. But if he does know what I did to the kids, he might want to take me out. So Jeff was fully aware that his brother would not have been on board with Jeff being a child molester.
Right. Hmm. Well, I
As a
like
matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff molested one of his stepsons.
Whoa. Well, I like kind of the sound of Sam already. I can tell you that much.
Sam was a character.
So now, do you stay in contact with his brothers by any chance after all this?
No, no, not at all. I ran into I don't want to say his good brother. Sam and Mike are dead now. But his one brother who's living, I bumped into him one time at a music store, and ironically enough, he was with a friend of his, and I guess the friend wasn't a close friend because I was walking in, he was walking out, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, not too much." And we're just uncomfortable, like, "Hey, how are you?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, so I'm just here." I said, "I'm just here to pick up Michael Jackson's History album." And the guy was like, "Oh, somebody ought to take Michael Jackson out that child molester." I was like, "Oh no, you didn't just say that. You clearly don't know who you're talking to."
Oh yeah, yeah. That's that. I
What
mean, that
I should have said.
given.
I should have said, "What do you think, Roland? Should somebody go shoot Michael Jackson?"
I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but that probably would have been very uncomfortable silence, probably in that store.
No, it was very uncomfortable.
Uh,
Hold on, real quick. I gotta let my cat out.
okay.
It's just crawling at the door. I don't want to. Huh? You know, they say a cat is never on the right side of the door because no matter whether you let them out, they fly out. Whether you let them back in, they fly out. So they're always on the wrong side of the door.
All right. So, what reason did his mom give your mom of why the hell you guys were in Port Arthur, Texas?
I don't know. I wasn't privy to that information. Jeff was did lie to his he lied to his mother and told his mother that he was going to New York. I guess he knew he had told her he owed money and was about to have to face the ban, and because his mother got him his brother Mike's birth certificate so he could get an ID when he got to New York, and so he told his mother that the bus is going from Port Arthur traveling east and was going to stop off in Baton Rouge and that they were going to pick me up there. So his mother honestly didn't know that he was taking me to California, but she knew he was heading out of town and needed some help with identification.
Okay. Now, I mean, did she ask why you were with him? I mean, was that ever a question that you know of? Like, I mean, what the hell is he doing showing up with his kid?
There was a lot of well, I mean, I guess Jeff's the one who said it, so I can go ahead and repeat it. But there was accusations against her mother made by Jeff, who told the police officers that when he was younger, the mother would basically prostitute him out to other men. So I think the mother probably had a idea why Jeff was always hanging around little boys.
All right, an inkling of what's going on here. All right, so they make the call. Your mom gets the sheriff say head up there, barely miss you. What is he telling you at this point in time? Like, is he telling you, hey, this is what we're gonna do? We're trying to run away. I mean, what is his, you know, what is he relaying to you at this time to kind of set you at ease? And how are you feeling at this time? Do you understand
Well,
what's going on?
I understood what was going on, but I mean, it was really no different other than he didn't have access to have sex with me. We were on a bus; he couldn't screw me on the bus, so that was nice.
Yeah.
No, he just said when we get to California, I'm gonna dye your hair black. We're just tell people you're my son. When we got to Tucson, he shaved his beard and mustache, and the women on the bus were like, "Why would you do that? You look so handsome with it." And he was like, "Oh, I'm going to be getting a job at the plants when I get to California, so I just went ahead and shaved anyway because they're going to make me shave to begin with." So I mean, he just had an excuse ready to go, and I mean, he looked old. I mean, he was 25, and the video of Daddy shooting him doesn't really show how old he looks because he didn't eat the whole time he was in jail. So he had lost 20 pounds in the 2 weeks that he was incarcerated. So you can see his clothes are kind of hanging off of him. And he had shaved his beard. And it was starting to grow back, but it wasn't as full as it was the whole time that I knew him. But if you watch the ESPN E60, and they show a little clip of him talking about takedowns, chokeholds, judo. Um, I mean, he looks way older, and he was only 24 when that video was made, which by the way, my dad got us on the news service because he used to work at Channel 2. That's how he knew the program director. That's how he found out when Jeff was coming in because he was friends with all those people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, at what point he said he was going to New York, but y'all never actually went to New York,
No, took a bus from Orange, Texas to Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Now, the finding him was kind of a I guess a neat little trick because he called collect from a hotel back to your mom.
Yeah, he let me call collect, and whenever we call, because he was running out of money. I think him letting me call correct collect was a surrender, because he let me call correct. I think uh, uh, he let me call collect, and my mother asked for time and charges. For those of you who are too young to remember what a collect phone call is, let me explain to you what a collect phone call is. Phone call is. Back in the day, we didn't have calling cards and cell phones, so you'd have to go to a landline. And if you wanted to make a long distance call, if you were, you have to put quarters in, put $5 of quarters in. Or if you're calling from a hotel room, they'll charge your room. Well, we had made a few calls to the room, went and paid for those, but we're running out of money, so he allowed me to call collect. And my mother asked the operator. The operator gets on the phone and says, "You have a collect call from Jody, and so do you accept the charges?" And then the person's like, "Yes." So when my mother asked for time and charges, that meant when the phone call was over, the operator would get back on the phone and talk to my mother and let her know how long the call was, time, and how much it costs, charges. So that was time and charges. So when the operator got back on the phone, Mike Barnett got on the phone and said, "Look, this is an FBI investigation. I need to know exactly where that call came from." And they told him it was 425 West Catella Street at the Samoa Motel Room 38. And then shortly thereafter, Jeff called my mother again, collect. And he was actually on the phone talking to her when the police came busting into the room.
Wow. So y'all were in there when the police come busting in. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And I was sitting closest to the door, so the majority of the guns were in my face.
Jesus. Now, when this happens, like, is there a sense of relief from you that it's kind of over? You're going back home. Jeff's caught, not going to be able to do this shit anymore, or what was going through your mind?
Nothing. There was nothing I was looking forward to. I knew when I got back. Well, first I knew one, we're leaving a hotel room and we're going back to the police station, and I know they're going to question me. I know what they're going to ask, and I know I can't tell. Or at least that's how I felt. I couldn't tell. Then we left the police station and they took me to the hospital to get the rape report done. So I knew then, okay, one day this report's going to come back and it's going to prove to everyone that I'm lying. I said, but until that happens, I'm not saying shit. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not telling on Jeff. So go to the hospital at 4 o'clock, leave the hospital 4 in the morning. I get to this home for like neglected children. They check you in. I mean, I had to shower. I had to put on their clothes. I had to check my stuff in like I was a prisoner. I spent that day there, and I flew out the next morning at 1:10 a.m. from LAX. My dad had got a plane ticket to fly me back to New Orleans, and so I flew in at like 6 o'clock in the morning into New Orleans, knowing I've got all this shit to do, go to talk to the police and all this, and lie. And when I get off that plane, I look up. I'm walking towards my parents. They don't recognize me because my hair's dyed black, and I see a television camera, and I was like, "What the fuck are they doing here?" And I think that may have been the exact quote. Right now, I think at 11, I may have told my mother. But at one point in the video, she reaches over and she hugs me, and she's like, "Smile, pretend like you're happy to be home." And I was like, "Eh." And then the guy takes, "What do you think of all this?" And he puts the microphone in my face. And I'm like, "I don't know." I mean, nowadays they wouldn't, they would nowhere go near a child victim, But it was my dad's friend, so I put that on my dad as well because my dad called him, "Hey, look, my son's coming back. He's been kidnapped. Come, y'all, you did a story on him and his karate teacher this summer that we had won some karate tournaments in Fort Worth, and so they did like the local karate school does good." So they knew this guy. They knew my dad. So that's why they were there. And the only reason why they were there in Baton Rouge was to do the follow up. 2 weeks ago, we did this story about this boy who'd been kidnapped and taken to California by his karate teacher. We're doing the follow up. And if you go on YouTube, go to type in WBRZ airport shooting, and they have the news from that night. From the night test. At 10, Jay Young, John Happy. Oh, we break into this story tonight. Oh, a tragedy has happened. I mean, you can watch the news from that night, and they run that little package that they were going to do, I believe.
Wow. So what you guys were gone, what, a total of 2 weeks?
All right, so he took me on February 19th, 1984. If you remember, 1984 was a leap year, and this
Mhm.
is one of my favorite things. If you look at Jeff's mugshot, it's from February 29th, 1984. So I got back March 1st. So from February 19th to March 1st, that's how long I was gone.
Okay. Now, what about once they've kind of arrested him out there, they bring you back. How long was the gap before they brought him back?
He came back March 16th, just over 2 weeks.
So just over 2 weeks. Now, you
And then
mentioned
the hospital report came back positive. My parents were informed March 9th. That was 1 week before the shooting.
okay. So roughly about a 2 week gap here. You get back a week later, they get the report back. How was that delivered? Did they come to your house and talk to your parents, or how was that delivered?
Well, first things first. As soon as I got back, they took me up to the sheriff's office, and they didn't question me. They interrogated me. They treated me like a hostile. They threatened me. They told me that my parents I could be taken away from my parents if I'm lying. I knew that it was bullshit. I knew they were bullshit, and I knew I wasn't going to tell. So I just stuck to the story. I told everything but the truth. But did Jeff touch you? No, Jeff didn't touch me. Oh, well, where did y'all go? Oh, we went to Disneyland. Oh, where did he sleep? We slept in bed together. He slept right next to me. What y'all sleep in? Our underwear. Okay. And so they questioned me probably for 3 hours, and I wasn't giving in. I wasn't going to break. And they went back to my parents, and they said we've been questioning kids for years, and either that man did nothing to him because he's not admitting it, or he'll never admit it. He's so brainwashed, and they were wrong both times. Because a week later, when Mike Barnett came to tell my parents about the hospital report, my mother was at the bus stop waiting for me. So I knew it came in. I knew this was the talk we were about to have. And she told my brother to stay, go play, go play. And so he went off with the kids on the bus, who had gotten off the bus. And she took me back home. We sat out in my living room or den, and she was like, Mike Burnett came over today and he told us that the hospital report came back positive. And I tried to play stupid, like, oh, what does that mean? And she's like, it means Jeff fooled with you. And I was like, yep, he did. I was like, been happening for a year. I mean, I came out and told him how it started, how it began, how long it had been going on. I don't know, like if in the first initial sit down that I told everything, but I mean, I came clean, and so I proved those cops wrong. He did fool me, and I did come clean. I just knew I wouldn't tell him on Jeff because Jeff, if I would have told on Jeff, they'd have told him. He'd have came back. I felt he was going to get out of jail after a couple months, like they all do,
Yeah.
and he was gonna come back and threaten me for telling on him, and that wasn't gonna happen.
Well, obviously, we know what the result was, but when your father gets this news, what is his mind frame?
He said, "I'm gonna kill him." He said he's a dead man. And so when Mike flew out to California a week later to go get Jeff, my mother was like, "Mike, I'm worried about Gary." And Mike's quote, I think I have it wrong in the book, but it's right in the audio book. He said, "I've been protecting prisoners way before Gary decided to become a hitman. You ain't got to worry about nothing." Whew, I should have said that one. That didn't hold up well.
Yeah. So, and then you alluded earlier, your dad worked with some of the guys in the TV station. The guy that I guess told him when Jeff was coming back, who was that?
A guy named Bob Shadell. He was a program director at the time.
Okay, so he how did he know when they were coming?
They're the news.
Oh, okay,
I
so
mean, that's their job to know. They probably got a call. They probably called the sheriff's department and said, "Hey, when's Barnett coming back with you? Said we're going to do a follow up story." And they're like, "Oh, let me look it up. Oh, he's coming in at flight so and so at 9:08 tonight. He'll be back in." And so actually, Bob still made that phone call. Went back to my dad and said, "No, he'll be back at 9:08 tonight." Because my dad was like, "I think he's back. They won't tell me." And Bob was like, "I'll make that call." Well, my dad for years would say he overheard them talking and Bob wasn't talking directly to him, but that was Daddy was trying to protect his friend.
right,
So
trying to
no, Bob Chanel said, no, he's not back. I'll go make the call. So he called the news station, and that's how my dad was able to find out the information.
now. What do you
Oh
think?
wait, here's the funny part. Right? So after the shooting, Mike Barnett called my mother and was like, "Did you tell him?" And my mother was like, "I thought you told him." And Mike's like, "No, I didn't tell him." My mom's like, "Well, I didn't tell him." And my mother was like, "Gary will tell me who told him." And so the news channel two was trying to make it that the police officers had tipped Daddy off. And when my mother told Mike, Mike laughed and said, "They're trying to pin this shit on me." He goes, "Wait till they find out it was one of their own." So that to me was the ironic part. But I have a good relationship with the people at WBSG Channel Two. I did an interview a few years back, so I'm not trying to say anything bad about Channel Two. I love Channel Two, but
So,
and my dad loved Channel Two.
Do you think Bob thought your dad was going to do what he did, or he was just more or less giving him the heads up that, hey, he's not back yet. He's coming in tonight. I mean,
He clearly didn't know my father would bring a firearm into the terminal of an airport and start shooting. Did he think my dad would go to the airport, make a scene, try to fight him?
try to whoop his
One
ass. Yeah.
1,000%, 1,000%. Bob knew that was going to happen because my dad had been talking about it for a week.
Right. And I can totally see that, being the case, because obviously, yeah, I can totally see your dad's first reaction finding out that Jeff did this to you. And, his first reaction be, I'm going to kill him. He's a dead man. To me, that's a complete rational reaction. And I don't give a shit who thinks any different. That's what I would do.
That's
and I would think any father would do.
What any loving parent would think. I mean, because if you watch the E60, they asked my mother, like, did you ask Gary why he did it? My mother's like, I didn't ask him why. I asked him, the least you could have done was let me drive you.
Yeah.
Let me be a part of it.
I don't think anybody should need to ask why he did it. That should not be, that shouldn't even have to be asked. I would think anybody with any common sense can understand why he did it.
Well, they asked Mike Barnett. They asked him, because whenever my dad turns around and shoots him, you hear Mike. He goes, "Woo! God damn it, Gary! Why? Why, Gary?" And he runs. He protects my dad from Bud Connor, the other cop, right? And so I see people comment on YouTube like, why would he ask that stupid question? We know why. I'm like, no, he's asking him, why would you put yourself in a position to go to jail for the rest of your life when you have 4 kids at home? Why would you do that, Gary? Why? That's what he was asking. He knew what Jeff had done to me, so that's what he was saying, why too.
So back in these days, obviously airport security is nowhere near, what it is now. What type of gun did your dad have?
I'll tell you what, it was a 38, and I bet you I could bring a 38 to the exact spot where Daddy was. They still have the if you see the video, the metal detectors when they come walking around the corner, you can see the detectors in the background.
Right.
And the metal detectors are now a little closer, but there's an ATM where the phone used to sit, and you can go up those stairs in that airport and get to that ATM without going through this metal detector. Not that I'm giving anybody tips on how to get guns in the airport because it's illegal. Don't do it. But I mean, it wasn't that, oh, you could have guns in the airport. It wasn't a wild wild west. It's just Daddy was smart enough not to try to go to the gate to wait in the lobby and catch him as
he knew where to get to. So it was a 38. What do you have it in his boot?
Yeah, in his boot. When you see the video, you see his right pant leg is up because he pulled the gun out of the boot.
So he's just sitting there at these bank of payphones. He's already got an idea about the time that he's fixing to come off. There was reports that I read, and I was going to see if you could shed some light on this, that somebody knew what he was doing and was trying to call in and warn him. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he was on the phone with his best friend. He was talking to his best friend, Jim Adams.
He actually was on the phone.
Yeah, he said so Mike Barnett came out first to look for any parents. And Daddy didn't see Jeff and Bud because they waited in the, down the corridor. And so Mike, the video begins with Mike, waving them on. And he's like, "Come on."
Yeah, kind of checking out. Coast is clear, guys. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, "All right, come on." And then, but you can see Mike still kind of looking behind the camera. He's still kind of looking behind the camera as he goes out of focus or out of the picture. And then you can see Bud and Jeff are talking to each other. And he's like, if you see anyone hit the ground, and just like, all right, and I mean, they were looking behind the camera too. No one was looking this way. And so they're looking at the camera, and bow, Daddy. He told his friend, he said, they took him out the other way because I see Mike, and Jeff's not with Mike. And then the lights on the camera came on when the Mike Burnett waved them on. The lights on the camera came. Oh wait, no wait. He goes, the lights are on. He's like, okay, you know what? Here they come. You're gonna hear the shot. And he kind of when those lights went from here to directly. I mean, my dad was a cameraman at Channel 2. He knew what that meant. That's why everyone's like, oh, he no scope 360 to 180 him or whatever. I'm like, well, he was able to look at the side of the sunglasses to see him, and then they disappeared. And then he knew when that light got straight, it was time to turn. That's why he turned right at the right angle, which is like boom, and he lifted up perfectly.
Yeah.
This way, if they were filming that scene for a movie, they'd probably have 15 takes.
Right. And just the way that guy was positioned, I mean, just happened to be perfect. Now, was that live? Was that live on TV?
Everyone will tell you that they watched it live that night on the news. They were not doing a live broadcast. That Jeff landed at 9:08, and I think the emergency call came in at 9:30. So they
Okay.
were able to record it. If you go to my website, there's the unedited version. It's graphic, so just be heads up. But if you go look at the 1 minute and 4 second mark, you see the tape goes. That was the cameraman changing tapes. So the cops were like, "Hey, we want that tape." He was going to take one and give it to the cops so he could have the footage of the shooting with him. So they went back to the truck and they had to beam it back to the station so they can decide what they were going to show of it. Because I mean, like I said, it's very graphic. And so they made a decision that they weren't going to show the bloody parts, but they were going to actually show the shooting, show Jeff go to the ground, and then cut it there. And so that's what you see. You see, uh, Bud walk over to Jeff and he just kind of shakes his head and puts his head down.
Right. So obviously, I mean, Jeff Doucette meets his expiration date on that day, which I'm not sad about one bit. Um, we've said it a couple times on this podcast. I consider your dad a hero for doing that, but obviously the law looks at things a little different. What did they ultimately charge your dad with?
That night, they charged him with attempted second degree murder. Jeff was kept on life support to donate his organs. He wasn't totally worthless. And his official date of death was the 17th. And so once he was officially declared dead, it went to second degree murder. My dad eventually pled no contest to manslaughter, was given 7 years hard time, suspended, 300 hours probation, no, 300 hours community service, and 5 years probation. So the judge said that putting him in jail would not serve any purpose because my dad wasn't a threat. And after my dad's probation, his probation officer said that my dad was his best parolee or probationee or whatever that he's ever had because he was always on time. He took his drug test. He passed all his drug tests. He went to AA. He went to his meetings. He got his community. I mean, he did everything that you're supposed to do.
Right.
And so for everybody who's like, well, he killed somebody who was in custody. My dad, if my dad wasn't so many friends with so many people, and people knew my dad was a good man, a good-hearted, kind-hearted man, if my dad was like this asshole, then maybe they would have treated him differently. But my dad was a pillar of the community before the shooting, and I can assure you, after a much bigger pillar. You
Yeah, I've
know,
heard you say in interviews that your dad was so well liked in that community that he can get away with murder.
and he did.
Yeah, and he did.
Well, and I've also said to the same people that were in the positions of power that got my dad probation would have also been the same people in power that would have got Jeff sentenced to the penitentiary for the rest of his life. And there's no doubt because Jeff made the statement to my mother. He said, "If you don't meet me in New York, you'll never see Jody alive again." And that took kidnapping to aggravated kidnapping. And aggravated kidnapping in Louisiana, I think now and in '84 was mandatory life, no probation, no
Right.
parole. So Jeff was going to jail for the rest of his life. Now, if you ask me, would I rather be here almost 40 years later talking to you, or have Jeff and have Daddy shoot him and not go to not go to jail and all that? I probably wouldn't have at 11 years old picked that. I probably at 11 would have wanted Jeff to go to jail for the rest of his life and be not have a great life because we're all going to die.
Right.
Jeff would have had that 25-year period of being in jail where before he died he just was miserable. So I would have liked for him to suffer that way. Daddy let him off easy.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what, you have to battle because, that's the one thing you would say when you put yourself in there. Obviously, your first inclination is, I'm going to kill the son bitch. But then you have to look at it from the psychological aspect of, you shoot them and they're done. So is it worth not doing that? But then you have to put your trust in the justice system that doesn't always come through for you. And if you decide to put your trust in the justice system and just say for some reason something happens, then he's back out, and nowhere near the amount of time that he should be in. So I think that's also something that, sometimes you have to take in context too. But in your case, like what you're saying, with him saying that you'll never see him alive again, it sounds like that would have been a surefire shot to life. So that's something to weigh, whether he should have been in there and had to suffer and be miserable. And they're not kindly to pedophiles in prison from the
No, not
stories
at
and
all.
guys that I've talked to. That they're not going to
Now,
have a good ride.
if Daddy could have got off a couple gut shots and looked at him and said, "I told you not to fuck with my family. I did this to you," I might feel a little different.
Yeah.
But but Jeff never saw it. I mean, I don't want to be a spoiler, but I mean, if you've ever watched Ozark, that it kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. Did your dad have to spend any time in jail at all, like after the first arrest or anything like that?
All right, so he shot him on a Friday night. So they took him to Parish Prison. They booked him. That he couldn't post bail till Monday morning.
Mhm.
So he was, he did Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And he got out of jail Monday morning. And he never went back.
Wow. Well, hats off to the judge and everybody around there. And it sounds like the whole town was kind of rallying for him from reports and everything that I've read. I don't think you really had probably anybody in that town that wanted to see that verdict go any other way than and what it did. I see that they had to probably find him guilty of something, but as far as in lieu of him, having to spend any time incarcerated, I'm glad that they, made the decision they made to do.
Yeah, who's going to put this father of four, who's a heavy equipment salesman, no police record, four kids, oldest being 12 or 13, um, volunteered his time coaching children. And for the record, my dad became the assistant football coach for our local Breck Perkins Road Park Eglets, is what they were called at the time. And so, like year two, my dad became the head coach, and he was the head coach for several years, 3 or 4 years, and we were the first integrated team in Baton Rouge. So, like, we were mixed, and so my dad took all the kids off the other teams who had gotten cut and put his team together. So if you look at old photos from like 1977, 78, it's a mixture of white and black football players. And every team we would play was either all white or all black. And so we were the first and only at the time integrated. And so, I mean, there are guys that I played football with 42 years ago that I'll post something on Facebook and they'll be like, man, your dad was awesome. And they're not talking about the guy who shot somebody. They're talking about the guy that coached them, gave them attention, that, for 2 hours a day, he was kind of like their father figure.
Yeah.
And that's the man my dad had. That's the man my dad was. And so that's part of the reason why he was, because he had the sympathy of everybody. A lot of everybody knew him.
Yeah. So how was your adjustment like after this is over? Obviously, this had to be a whirlwind, that happening, you getting rescued, you coming back, then a week later, them finding out, then a week after that, the shooting. What was life like for you and how did you adjust kind of back to normalcy? How was that process?
Well, I see like it goes viral every 3 weeks on Facebook. Someone will tag me in it. Like I was tagged twice yesterday in two different videos, and I'll see some people go, "Oh, it's a sad because him and the father never had a good relationship after that." And I'm like, "No, that's not true." All right, so my parents were separated at the time of the shooting. My dad went and spent like a 3 weeks to a month at a mental institution, and then when he got out, he came home. I think he came home a few times on a weekend, kind of. And they told my mother, he needs you now more than ever. And so she's like, if he doesn't drink, I'll take him back. So he quit drinking. He moved back in. And so it wasn't until probably that summer we were walking down to the pool, and I was like, just so you know, I'm not mad at you for what you did to Jeff. Because I mean, I at first I was mad at what he did. Because I mean, one, he let my secret out. Nobody knew what I'd been molested, but he let that secret out. He let that cat out of the bag. But and it was like I said, so from spring March 16th till probably sometime in July, I wasn't real receptive to my father. But as we walked down to the pool, I remember telling him that I forgive him, but I'm not mad at him anymore. And I think that meant a lot to him. And so after that, I think we had a fairly healthy relationship. Once he got off probation, he started drinking again. I would have preferred for him not to drink again because, I knew my mother would leave him again, and she did. They separated again. This time she moved to Biloxi in '91, but um, they never divorced, and they were married and were friends until the day he died. I mean, my mother and sister spent all day with him that Sunday. He died Monday night. That whole Sunday, they spent all day with him. He was at the nursing home because he had a stroke and he needed full time care that we couldn't provide. But we would go get him every weekend, bring him home. So it wasn't like we abandoned him. My sister would take him out fishing at the nursing home and bring him out to get margaritas. At that point, I didn't give a shit if he drank. There's one story in my book where he asked me like, and she's like, "Can I get him one of your beers?" My mother's like, "Can I get him one of your beers?" I'm like, "Yeah, go get him one of my beers." And my dad opens it, or we opened the beer up for him, and he took that beer and he just went, and he wanted another one. All right, go get him another one. He took that second one. He went, and he wanted another one. And my mother was like, no, Gary, I'm going to get you some tea. I said, all right. So she walks over. She fixes him a cup of tea. I walk over to the freezer. I get my bottle of vodka. Whenever she hands him his tea, I walk over, gunk, 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 gunk. He just looked up at me with a big old smile on his face, like, you know what I want. At that point, I figured, what's it gonna do? You know, he ain't drinking and driving. He's in a freaking wheelchair. He's going back to the nursing home. At this point, for all the reasons we told him not to drink while we were growing up, it was too late. All the bad shit that we worried about was going to happen to him happened to him. So at this point, we're like, live the rest of your life however you want
Yeah.
it, as you can. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
my
no, he really.
granddaddy was similar in that he smoked most of his life, and then he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and they had him on oxygen. He was still smoking even when he was on oxygen. And I remember I was young at the time, and I remember the nurse coming in there is like, now, Mr. Williamson, you can't be smoking, with these oxygen tanks in here. You'll blow the house up. He said, well, I didn't tell you to bring him in here. He said, I ain't gonna stop smoking. She said, why wouldn't you stop? You've got cancer. And he's like, what's that gonna change? He's
Yeah.
like, why do I stop now?
My dad did the exact same thing. He had a triple bypass. Maybe I think it was quadruple bypass surgery. And so he was in the hospital for a couple of days. And my mother was sitting up there with him, and she fucking oops, she fell asleep. And so the nurse comes in there. Well, Daddy had gotten up, went over to her purse, got her cigarettes, and he's sitting there with the oxygen tank. And I'm like, oh, that's waiting for an explosion to happen. But so they got on my mother, like, you can't be giving him cigarettes. And my mother's like, I didn't give him no goddamn cigarettes. He came and stole them from me when I was sleeping. And he was also doing some medicine where he's sitting in the hospital and he was fishing. He was sitting there just out of it, just sitting there fishing. I'm like, look at this, look at
Oh man, that's crazy. So the book, Why Gary Why? Obviously, that title comes from what you heard as soon as the shot was fired in the video. When did you write the book?
I started writing the book in I think August of 1993. I was at Northlake College in Irving, Texas, and that's when I would go into the computer lab and I would start writing. I would start writing. I thank God I did. Well, then it dawned on me in like January of '94 that I need to go back to Baton Rouge because that's where all the people are. So I moved back to Baton Rouge. Even had a nice little write up article that I was writing a book in the local paper, and decided to go back to school because I decided I wasn't ready to finish the book. So I went back to school. I wanted to graduate. I wanted to get my degree. So I got my degree in '97 from LSU. Excuse me. And then I still wasn't ready. So in '98, I got a job at a place called Victim Services Center in Montgomery County, Incorporated, outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, located in Norristown, serving Montgomery County. And I worked there. I was a certified sexual assault counselor. I did community education safety programming. I mean, I've taken calls on the crisis hotline. I've gone on hospital accompaniments. I've gone to police accompaniments. I've gone on court accompaniments with victims of sexual assault and other crimes because it was a comprehensive center. It wasn't just sexual assault at Victim Services. We dealt with family members of homicides. Every year they have a homicide vigil recognizing the people who've died in Montgomery County, and I mean they still do it to this day. I did a presentation there a couple of years ago, but it wasn't until I want to say February of 2017 where I was like, you know what? Let's get this book taken care of. So I met with some people, introduced me to these people, hired a book writing company, worked with them for like 9 months. Finally, I got my first draft of what my book was going to be, and I was like, "What's this shit? This is terrible." And it didn't really tell. It didn't tell the story. It was more like this self-help kind of book, and I was like, "This ain't going to work." So I had written something. I want to say, let's say, 10 years ago that I was looking for. So I was going through old computers looking for this. It was like chapter one that I'd written after '93. So I made a new chapter one. I wanted to start from the beginning, and I found that, and it actually was really good. Oh, and I'll share this story with you. I just found out. Um, so I found what I'd written in '93. So I found 27,000 words that I had written telling my story in my words from '93. So what I did was I took that file, I sent it to the book writing company, and I said, make it happen. So they kind of merged them to where it didn't sound like a self-help book because, and if you read the book, you can tell there's two distinct books. Actually, the guy my dad was talking to on the phone, his son told me I should do two books. One, do the book of my story, and two, do the book of the safety, self-help. And I was like, no, because I can use my experience through that to kind of make it relate. And it took me forever to write the book because I really and a reporter asked me when a book came out. He's like, "Why did you wait so long?" I said, "Because I felt like my dad that night. I knew I had one shot to get it right, and so I wanted it to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, it's not perfect, and I kind of welcome the misspelled words or whatever. But it just came out on audio back on November 1st. So if you don't like to read, you can go to Amazon. You can get the book. You can get a Kindle version, or you can get a paperback, or you can go to Audible and download the audio book. It's only 6 hours on audio, and I actually enjoyed listening. Like I had to listen to the audio book like 10 times. I was proud of myself. I was like, you know what? It's a damn good book. And every parent that should be sold in hospitals where babies are delivered. It should be right next to what to expect when expecting how to keep your child safe.
Yeah.
So if you're a parent, or if you are an aunt or uncle, niece, nephew, if you're a teacher, I promise you, there's a lot of valuable information if you can get past my bragging. I say that jokingly because if you go to Amazon and look at my reviews, they're all really good except this one from this girl called Crystal. She was like, all he did was brag. And so what did I do? I screenshotted it, posted it on Facebook. You goddamn right I'm bragging. I was sexually abused for a year. I was kidnapped. My father shot the guy on television. I've never cut my wrist. I graduated college. I went and gave back, worked at Victim Services Center. I'm still speaking to this day. Yeah, you damn right. I mean, I'm not trying to, but it is really got a lot of good information in it for parents and just people in general.
Well, it's important to know that, with everything you just named off, a lot of people after that would be addicted to drugs or, you know, God knows where, homeless. I mean, it could lead down so many bad paths. So to be able to twist what you had happen to you, all the events, which had to be such a whirlwind because it happened in such a close proximity of each other, to twist that and to now do something positive with it is really great. And that's,
Hey, I'll, I'll drink to that.
yeah, right. Well, we're going to put links to that book in our show notes. I'm actually a avid Audible listener just because my free time to actually read physical books is very limited. So we kind of put this together last week. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen to
I'll send you a promo
it.
code.
Okay. All right.
I'll send you. Yeah, I got like 40 promo codes that I can send for people like you. If I'd have thought about it, I would have sent it to you before we had this discussion. But maybe you can listen to it and we can jump on again, kind of like do a little quick 10-minute kind of recap before you
Yeah.
put everything together.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Sure. And I'm, like I said, I'm a big Audible listener. That's when I'm working, man, I can just let them play away in my ear. And that's kind of how I help pass the day. So, listen, man, I'm going to hold you up anymore. It's been, what's the name? What's the name you got?
Her name is Lolo Jones. I found her when she was like 6 weeks old, walking on the shoulder of Interstate 10 west, heading to Houston. And so I pulled over and I picked her up. But I named her Lolo Jones because LSU has a famous track woman named Lolo Jones. And every time, like the cat will walk up to you and meow, and when I go to pick her up, she'll run. And so whenever I come home, she'll come running from the back and she'll slide across. Like she's almost like a dog when I come home from work. She's so happy to see me. But I call her Lolo because she wants me to pick her up, but she runs from me every time I go to pick her up. So
Well, man, like I said, we're going to put links in the show notes for everybody to go pick up that book. Book is Why, Gary, Why by Jody Plauche. Obviously, again, we're going to say it one more time. I consider your dad, Gary, a hero. I got a good feeling everybody that's a fan of this particular show will have the same, take on this whole situation. Like I said, man, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I thanks for inviting me. Just so you'll know, you reached out to me. I was at Twin Peaks with a friend of mine and my brother. It was my birthday. It was my birthday, so I was able to like, oh yeah, we can make this happen. But yeah, if you would have reached out to me earlier, we could have made it happen earlier. But I'm glad you did finally reach out, and we were able to get this taken care of.
Well, see, I found you because, like you said, those articles and those clips kind of resurface. People put it out, and of course, nowadays, things like that go viral. It's a lot easier. And I was reading through the comments. I'm always curious of what people's comments are. And you were in there, and you were like, "Yep, my dad done this." And I was like, "Dad," I was like, "Holy shit, that's his son." And I clicked on it. I'm like, "Damn, that's him." And so that's how I found you. I didn't. And then once I start doing that, then I realized you'd done a show with Tyler, who I'm, close to with Minds of Madness. So that's kind of what led me down. But I think it's cool that, you interact with everybody on there, and that's awesome.
You mentioned it was the first viral video, so let me tell you what I did. All right, so I signed up a couple of years ago to try to take the book and turn it into either a movie, a feature film, or whether a docu series or something like that. Well, believe it or not, people weren't interested. They told me people weren't interested in doing sexual abuse of children. And within the next 2 weeks, I probably watched 5 documentaries on sexual abuse. One was like the gymnast. One was about the victim A. Is that? They all run together. And then there were two where the girl was kidnapped and raped, and had a link to LSU, and then the second one I saw was another one that had a link to LSU. I'm like, this is crazy, but not that LSU is like a sexual abuse place, but it was just weird. That, I mean, literally a week after I was told that this documentary wasn't good, or people weren't interested because it's about child abuse, I said, well, why don't we change the focus of it? How about we do it uh, Gary Plauche, the first viral video? Because I mean, I've had Opie and Anthony talk about my dad. I've heard recently Joe Rogan mention my dad to another guy who was like, "Oh, Baton Rouge, yeah, I know the video." Joe Rogan was like, "I probably shouldn't have watched it as many times as I've watched it." He goes, "But I've watched this video over and over again." So you could get Howard Stern, you could interview these people, and like this video means a lot to a lot of people. You could just go pick people off of Facebook. So looking back now, it's been almost 40 years. I can see what my dad means to people. My dad stands for, you know what, our justice system is bullshit. It's an injustice system. But daddy stands for those who are voiceless. He stood up, and granted, what he did was commit a crime. I wish he wouldn't have done it. I wish Jeff would have went to jail for the rest of his life. But that's what my dad means to people. So when people are like, your dad's a hero, it doesn't bother me. I mean, because I understand what he means to them, and I understand what he means to people who've been through something and didn't get justice.
Well, in closing, I've got a question that I do want to ask you. In today's time and the landscape, and things are obviously drastically different in many different ways, do you think if the same thing happens, that the outcome is the same for the shooter?
Absolutely. I tell people all the time that daddy not only didn't go to jail, but he didn't lose his job, and he drove the company car to the airport.
Holy shit. What?
Well, I got to tell you this one last story. This one last story because it's new. I just found this out.
He drove the
All right,
company car to the airport.
yeah, he said the company car is always the best vehicle. It goes anywhere you want it to go. All right, so I just found this out. What's today? Today's February 7th. Okay, so I found this out February 4th. All right, so 3 days ago. In 1991, I made my first appearance on the Geraldo Rivera talk show. Okay, that was our first public. I was 18 years old. I was almost 19 years old. And that day they were filming 2 shows. Our shows, it was called Vigilante Parents. Can we blame them? And the show before us was titled The Day the Music Died. All right, so it was about the plane crash with Buddy Holly,
Buddy
Big
Holly,
Bopper,
Big Bobber, yeah.
and Richie Valens. So the woman Donna was there that Richie Valens sang about. Peggy Sue was there. I got to meet them.
Wow.
Buddy Holly's wife was there, and so was Little Richard. So I got to meet Little Richard. So the first time that show aired in June of that year, and after it aired, I got a call from Mike Burnett, and he said, um, "I just want you to know this is going to be on the news and in the paper. We arrested this pastor who had been molesting these 2 boys. One of the kids said that he saw you on Geraldo show, and that's what gave him the courage to come out and speak." Okay, so I go to Geraldo. The show before me is The Day the Music Died. Do you know the date of that plane crash?
No.
All right, that plane crash happened February 3rd, 1959. That was the day Jeff was born.
Wow.
Yeah, what are the odds that that's the show before me, and that show changed my life because that little boy came forward, and after that, I was like, you know what, I can take something negative, turn it into something positive, and use it to help others. And so since June of 1991, it's kind of been my mission to give back and try to let sexual abuse victims know that you're not scored for life, you're not damaged goods. With the proper support, you can be okay. But just that the fact that the day the music died was the day Jeff was born, and then we came together, and that kind of shaped my life. You're the first show I'm sharing this with because, like I said, I just found out the other day.
Wow, that's interesting. That's definitely deep to look in. But to that question though, I meant more or less like currently, right now. If the same thing that happened that your father did currently, like in 2023, do you think someone would get off on that?
I think if you look at it kind of, if daddy's the same age, daddy's kind of had the same experiences, knows the same people, absolutely, I think my dad would get away with it. Now, Ellie Nessler did it in '93, but she did it in the courtroom, and they found out that she was on meth whenever she was at trial, or when she did it, so they put her in jail. They did have a guy most recently, probably 10 years ago, who walked in on someone molesting his daughter, and he beat him to death, and he faced no charges.
Yeah.
So I think they'll give you a little leeway when it comes to you screwing kids.
I'm kind of curious I don't know if you're familiar with the UFC at all, but there was a guy by the name of Cain Velasquez, and
Shot the wrong guy.
Yeah, he shot the wrong guy. So obviously that's a different type of scenario. Obviously everybody knows what he was trying to do and what he was trying to accomplish. He wound up shooting the wrong guy. I'm curious to see how that plays out, because you always want to watch situations like this because they shape the landscape of, how things like this go. I myself was involved in something a couple of years back, so I pay close attention to anything similar when those cases became major news and, hit the media, because once people start sliding a certain way, then that changes things for everyone else. So, I mean,
well,
I'm glad
Cain will be a good example. Cain will be a good example because he did shoot the wrong person. But I do know this because I have done um, interview with people working on a project for him. I do know that he did spend a significant amount of time in jail. He was
yes.
away from his family, and I don't think that he would be a threat to try to uh, go out and try to seek harm to this person who he tried to seek harm to. I think he understands the value of being there for his child and not being locked up.
Yeah.
So I hope they do the right thing with him. I don't, again, with my dad, I don't see how putting him in jail would serve a greater purpose where you could get him to be, he can team up with me, and me and him could spread the news about, victimization all throughout the world if that's the case. So I think he could be more good doing that than being put in jail.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no threat of anybody else. He took out I guess the one problem in this whole scenario, which was Jeff Doucette, and done it with one shot. So, and I think that was key too. Had he maybe fired multiple shots, that may have, played a little bit different hand in this whole thing. But I think the one shot, and obviously one was all that was needed. So.
Or if, let's say, somehow the bullet goes through Jeff's head and hits the cop,
Yeah.
then my dad's looked at it one differently. But guess what? When we went on Geraldo at the time in '91, the first question from the audience, and this was the first time we had ever gotten any negative, the guy asked my dad, he said, "How do you trust yourself to go into a public building and start blasting away?" And my dad looked at him and stared at him. He said, "When I looked down the barrel of that gun, I knew exactly who I was hitting." And I was proud of my dad's answer. That day, I was like, "Oh, good answer, pretty good." Then we go to commercial break, and I look over, and Daddy's still staring. I said, "Daddy, stop that shit." Oh, well, okay.
Oh man, well, Jody, like I said, I'm glad you could come on the show and share your story. And definitely, once I get a chance to review that book, we'll have you back on. Maybe do a little quick 10 or 15 minute recap and put that on for all the listeners. But like I said, we'll definitely put we'll get your website on there, and then the Audible site for your books and everything, so people can go pick that up. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that would do it for this episode. I am Hollywood Wade. That was Jody Plauche, and unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Jody, we appreciate it, my friend.